There was a moment of hazy awareness before fully waking. Then there was the feeling of raindrops pelting over the exposed skin of his face. Anselm was aware of a dull, throbbing pain in his back and also a heavy weight crushing down upon his chest. Fully aware now, Anselm yet couldn't move for a long moment. The wretched corpse taste was still in his mouth. His eyes were burning. Clarity grew from the center of his vision out, a spot of sharp focus surrounded by an iris of blur. Finally, he found he could move and raise his head enough to see his state. He lay on his back at the bottom of the rectangular hole in several inches of muddy water. The sky above was now darkening quickly, so he must have been unconscious for a relatively short amount of time. He was pinned underneath a great mass of something, the identity of which it didn't take long to deduce. It was Clayton Howard, what was left of him. The body was in full decomposition. The skin was blackened and shriveled like that of a burn victim, crusted and misshapen so it barely represented what had once been a human being. The internal organs had long since liquefied, leaching through the cracked skin into the coffin, mixing with the groundwater into a toxic sludge, which Anselm had just ingested. Anselm gathered his strength and attempted to heave the cadaver off of him. It took him 3 tries. The body was saturated with liquid and far heavier than it should have been. His faculties were returning now, and he struggled to his feet. The original grave had been dug properly, and he was deeper than he was tall, though the hole he just made was narrow enough for him to touch both vertical sides. He could make out the metal arm of the backhoe above, several yards above his reach. There was nothing in the hole for him to grab to pull himself up. He reached out and clutched at the muddy wall, but his fist came back with a handful of wet earth. He checked all the walls to find the same, almost tripping over Howard's cadaver as he did so. Anselm knew he needed to get medical attention as soon as possible, antibiotics at the very least, to deal with the biohazard of what had just happened to him. He felt stupid more than anything else for his carelessness, but now he needed to suck it up and call his boss for help getting out of this godforsaken hole. Anselm reached into his pocket for his phone, hoping the fall into the water hadn't ruined it. But his fingers felt nothing. He checked his other pockets. Then he remembered. He'd been using it in the cab when he'd been reading the court letter, researching lawyers who specialized in custody disputes. He hadn't taken it out in the rain with him. It was still up there in the backhoe. The rain was beginning to pour down for real. In a moment, he was up to his ankles in muddy water. A wave of vertigo passed through him, and he was suddenly aware of a shortness of breath and a tingling feeling in his hands. His back ached. Anselm reached his palm to his chest, and he could feel his heart racing. He was having a panic attack, and a panic attack wasn't going to help him out of his situation at all. He closed his eyes and stood there for a long moment, focusing on his breathing, slowing it down until it was as close to normal as possible given the situation he was in. He had to think. He was going to have to get himself out of this, or he'd be spending the entire night down here with what used to be Clayton Howard. He called up several times for help, but he knew it was useless. Tommy was the only other groundsman, and he'd left early for his daughter's birthday dinner. The office staff, if they were even still here, was in the front building, a half-mile away on the other side of the cemetery, and there was a hill in between. Maybe, if he wasn't back by the time they went home, someone would drive by and check on him, but Anselm doubted that. He often finished up after everyone else had gone home. It came with being the newest guy. Digging his way up was going to be the only option.